I still remember that Thanksgiving morning clearly like a knife cut through the old wooden chopping block in the kitchen. At 62, you'd think you've experienced enough shocks to not be surprised by anything anymore. But it turns out, children always find new ways to make their parents' hearts ache. I, Richard Collins, a retired financial manager, thought this year I'd be sitting at the dinner table with my only son, Daniel, listening to the clink of forks and knives, smelling the stuffing stuffed turkey, the same smell that used to make my late wife, Maria, laugh and say I could open a restaurant. I thought that would be the case until that phone call. I picked up the phone and asked softly, "Hey son, what time would be good for me to come over?" "I've got the old turkey recipe ready, the one with sage stuffing your mom loved." I expected him to laugh, to say, "Sounds great, Dad." But instead Daniel's voice came through, as slick as a cheap commercial. "You don't need to come. We've got other plans." That "don't need to," said on the day when all of America gathers to say we need each other, hit me like a slap in the face. I paused for a few seconds, then let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, thanks for letting me know I'm unnecessary on the one day we're supposed to be together. Real considerate of you. No need to worry about where to seat me at the table." I hung up, not waiting for an explanation. I didn't need one. They were probably busy seasoning some overpriced sauce I paid for with my credit card, but couldn't find a spot for me at the dinner table. I turned around and looked at the empty kitchen. The copper pots hung silently, the fake flowers from last year collecting dust. The chair across from me was empty, the one that used to belong to Maria, the wife who left me 8 years ago. Back then, Thanksgiving was a small, warm celebration. Me, Maria, and young Daniel, laughing as he knocked over a bowl of cranberry sauce. Now, that memory felt like mockery. The kitchen felt more like a museum of memories, just missing the visitors. I sat down at my old swivel chair and opened my laptop, a habit hard to break, checking my bank account every morning. The screen lit up, numbers dancing, and then the latest transaction appeared. Apple Store, $1,299. I squinted. Daniel's credit card, the one I'd opened for him when he went to college, in case of emergencies. Emergencies? Emergencies so dire that he needed to buy a new MacBook during Black Friday week. I let out a dry laugh. "Don't need me, huh? Fine." My hand moved to click the freeze card button. My heart slowed, stretching out the moment to savor it. I clicked it. "Well, you won't need your card anymore either." The click was dry, faint, but it echoed in my chest like the sound of chains snapping. I leaned back in my chair, pouring myself a cold cup of coffee. The foam swirled in the cup, forming a half smile, a smirk just like mine. Then I turned and looked straight at you, those of you listening or reading this story. I know many of you have been treated like walking wallets by your own children. If that's true, tell me where you're sitting, what state you're in. I want to imagine a map of America, lights flickering on from Ohio, Texas, California, Florida, all the parents who've heard those "don't need you" words, just like me. Comment, let me know where you are. I bet that map would light up like a Christmas tree, but instead of colored lights, it would be the hearts of parents ignored by their kids. I took another sip of coffee, the bitterness spreading. Like a reminder, the silent game had just begun. Daniel thought he was clever, but he forgot that his father once managed millions every day. I knew the rules of the money game, and I just changed the rules for him. The house was quiet, only the tick-tock of the grandfather clock. I couldn't help but smile. No turkey, no guests, but I had my reward. Peace and that little thrill from watching a credit card turn into a useless piece of plastic. That night, I slept soundly, oddly at peace. Perhaps for the first time in years, I didn't worry that tomorrow Daniel would call just to say, "Dad, the card's maxed out. Can you increase the limit?" Number. Tomorrow, when his card is rejected at the gas station or the restaurant, he'll learn a lesson. If he doesn't need his father, then his father's money is no longer needed either. And that, my friends, is just the beginning. Someone once told me that time heals all wounds. They forgot to add the condition that you still have enough money and strength to patch things up. As for me, Richard Collins, I didn't have that choice. When Maria passed away from the cruel cancer, I was left with only Daniel, who was just 17 at the time. A tall boy, trying to appear strong but still holding me as he cried in my arms every night. I promised my wife on her deathbed that I would take care of the boy, that he would never lack for anything. And I kept my word, to the point of foolishness. In the early years, I threw myself into work like a madman. As a financial manager for a real estate company, I was used to spreadsheets miles long and giant numbers. But I had never seen a number heavier than the Harvard Business School tuition bill. $60,000 a year, not including dorm, books, or food. I gritted my teeth and paid. This is an investment in the future, I told myself. I treated Daniel as the biggest project of my life, one whose return wasn't measured in money, but in the happiness of seeing my son succeed. I still remember the day I dropped Daniel off at college. He hugged me, resting his head on my shoulder like when he was a little boy. "Dad, I'm scared," he said. I patted his back. "Don't worry. Just focus on studying. I'll take care of everything else." That phrase, while it sounded like love, was really a trap I had set for myself. Because from that moment, Daniel knew that whenever there was a problem, all he had to do was call Dad, and a solution would appear, usually in the form of 4 numbers and my signature. His first car was the same. Daniel said he needed one to get around the city, for group study convenience. I scoured the dealerships and bought him a new Honda Civic, safe and fuel efficient. But the very next week, Sophie, who was just his girlfriend at the time, took a picture of him sitting in the car and posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Daniel's new ride, thanks to hard work." I looked at the phone screen and smiled bitterly. Hard work? The real hard work was the 10th night shift I worked to make sure we could afford that car. But I didn't say anything. A father must swallow his pride, right? Then came the credit card. I clearly remember the night Daniel called. "Dad, I'm in Boston, and sometimes I need to buy books or book a flight, but it's such a hassle. Could you open a supplementary card for me? Just to get by, just to get by." I heard those 3 words and automatically pulled out my wallet, like Pavlov's dog. I went to the bank, signed the papers, and handed him the shiny silver card. Daniel took it, hugged me, and said, "I promise I'll only use it when I need to." I believed him, just like I had believed that my wife would recover even though the doctors had given up. From that point on, the credit card became the link between my son and me. But instead of connecting us with love, it connected us with bills. Every month, I received statements filled with numbers. Starbucks, Zara, Uber, Apple Store. Each number was proof that Daniel was living well and happy, while I was losing hair and gaining wrinkles. I often sat alone in the living room, looking at an old picture. Daniel when he was 8, wearing a superhero pajama, hugging me tightly during a stormy night, whispering, "I'm scared of the thunder, but with you here, I'm okay." I used to be his superhero, able to protect the world with just a raised hand, but now I had become an ATM. Just swipe the card and the magic would appear. The superhero had retired and been replaced by a walking ATM. That little credit card became for me both love and a shackle. Every time I looked at it, I remembered Maria's face when I promised to take care of our son. I kept my word, but the price was that I bound myself. I thought that by throwing money at him, I was buying happiness. But in reality, I was only buying contempt. Once, an older colleague looked at me and jokingly said, "By taking care of your son like this, he'll get used to it, and one day you won't have a say." I laughed it off and replied, "As long as he's happy, I'll be quiet." I didn't realize at the time that I was writing the script for a tragic comedy of old age, sitting alone at home, eating a frozen dinner I bought on sale, while my son sips French wine, everything paid for by my card. I don't blame Daniel entirely. Any child raised with the promise, "Dad will take care of everything," will naturally grow up thinking that's the way it works, like the sun rising or water flowing. The mistake was mine. In my blind sacrifices, thinking that the more I gave, the stronger the love would be. I forgot that love isn't measured in receipts, and gratitude doesn't grow in soil watered with money. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering Maria's words. Don't spoil him too much or he'll forget how to stand on his own. I had brushed it off, saying, no, he'll be grateful. It turns out Maria was right. I lost my wife, and slowly I was losing my role as a father. So when Daniel said, Dad, I don't need you for Thanksgiving, I didn't just hear a rejection. I heard the condemnation for 5 or 10 years of unconditional sacrifice, a sentence written in fine print on each bank statement. I heard the sound of the shackles falling to the floor, the shackles I had put on myself. And that's why, when my finger hit the freeze card button, I felt an unusual sense of relief. Not just because I blocked a transaction, but because for the first time in years, I stopped a chain of mistakes. If Daniel was the child who learned to see me as an ATM, then Sophie was the bank employee behind him, knowing exactly when and where to withdraw money, all while pretending to offer friendly customer service. I have to admit, she's clever. Sophie never directly asked me for money. Number, she would suggest it, and then Daniel, like a recording device, would call me. Dad, we're planning a trip to Europe, just once in a lifetime, right? Once in a lifetime? How funny. That once turned into 3 trips in 4 years, each lasting a month, staying in 4- and 5-star hotels, with the bills all charged to my card. I remember the first trip. Sophie posted an entire album on Facebook titled, Our European Success Trip. I scrolled through each photo. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. Everywhere Daniel's bright smile and Sophie's glamorous dresses. They stood in front of the Eiffel Tower holding champagne glasses, sat in St. Mark's Square, Sophie draped in a fur coat, Daniel looking dapper like a successful businessman. I looked at those pictures in the dark living room, next to a bowl of instant noodles, for 3 consecutive days. I wanted to comment, our success? Why not tag my account number to complete the picture? But I stayed silent. What kind of father would expose his child on social media? I just sat there, sighed, and mocked myself. I'm in every picture, but unfortunately, as a bank account number. The wedding ring was the same. One day Daniel called, Dad, Sophie really deserves a special ring. I want to surprise her, but it's a bit expensive. I asked, how expensive? He casually replied, just 18,000. Just. The word just choked me. I had spent 6 months paying off a loan for Maria's kitchen, and yet an 18,000 ring for Sophie was just 18,000. But in the end, the bill still showed up on my statement. On the wedding day, Sophie flashed her sparkling hand before the crowd, her friends gasping in awe. I sat in the back row, feeling like an invisible stagehand, lighting the stage but never called by name. The lavish habits didn't stop there. Their new home, a luxury apartment in downtown Phoenix, was also silently tied to my name. Daniel said, Dad, think of it as an investment. The value here will increase a lot. I nodded, signed the loan papers again, and saw the deduction from my account. On moving day, Sophie posted a picture. Finally, our dream home. Hard work pays off. Hard work. I almost choked on my coffee. Hard work by whom? I feel like Sophie truly believes that money grows on trees in my backyard, and her job is simply to pick it to decorate their dream home. Every item in their house was like a small slap in my face. The $10,000 Persian rug, the $20,000 Italian leather sofa, the $3,000 curved TV, all paid with my card. I walked past, hearing Daniel bragging to his friends, typing my PIN number, but I just sneered and walked away. Once, Sophie invited her whole family over for a wine party. I was there too, standing awkwardly like an uninvited guest. Sophie proudly introduced the apartment and each piece of furniture as if she had bought it herself. When guests complimented, "You two are amazing, getting all this so soon after marriage," Sophie smiled sweetly, and Daniel nodded proudly. I held my wine glass, kept my mouth shut, and thought, yeah, I'm amazing. Amazing enough to become a financial ghost in this house. Sophie has a talent for turning everything I pay for into a medal pinned to Daniel's chest. Outsiders look at Daniel and see a successful man, a pillar, a young version of the American dream. I look at him and see a boy who never learned to pay bills on time. Sophie didn't just help hide that fact, she nurtured it. Whenever Daniel hesitated to call me, Sophie would stand behind him, softly whispering, "Just this once, let Dad see he still matters." But the only important thing I was left with was the ability to enter my credit card number. The truth is, Sophie and Daniel live on a lavish stage built by my money. I paid to be the background. They played the leads, and I sat off stage, watching the audience applaud. What's even more absurd, I had to pay for the ticket to get in. Airline tickets, hotel bookings, birthday gifts, just to watch my son wear the facade of success. Once I tried to suggest, "You two should save, think about the future. I won't always be here to take care of it." Sophie smiled, sweet as honey but sharp as a knife. "Mr. Collins, we work hard too. But life's meant to be enjoyed, right? Money is just a tool. Money is just a tool." I sipped my wine, laughed bitterly. Right, but this tool has my name on it. In those years I learned one thing. Not all sacrifices are remembered. Some sacrifices just become the cement paving the way for others, and the ones walking on it don't even care to say thank you. I paved the way for Daniel and Sophie to enter a glamorous world, while I stepped back, giving up all the light. And what did I get in return? A short sentence. "I don't need you for Thanksgiving." I look back at the years Sophie entered Daniel's life, and I understand. She didn't just take my son. She turned me into a supporting character, erased from my own family's story. And all of this was legitimized by a small piece of plastic, a credit card, symbolizing blind love and the shackles I put on myself. That's why, when I froze the card, it felt like removing a pair of shackles. Those shackles didn't just bind money, they bound my self-respect. Sophie may have turned Daniel into a fake businessman, may have written our success 1,000 more times, but this time, my account number won't be backing them up. And I'm ready to see what happens when the lights go down and their stage falls apart. I have been a financial manager for nearly 40 years, but never has a stack of paper made my hands tremble like the set of statements printed that day. The printer hummed in the small office, the paper rolling out, each sheet a cut into my self-respect. 5 years, over $220,000, all piled up into a mountain of black and white paper. Starbucks, Gucci, Apple Store, round-trip flights to Rome, to Paris, to places I had only seen in travel magazines in the dentist's waiting room. The yellow desk light cast over the papers, turning them into a mound of evidence lying right in front of me. I sat in the old swivel chair, feeling like I was attending a trial where I was both the witness, the defendant, and the victim. Defendant: Richard Collins, charge: foolish, exploited by children. Witness: also Richard Collins, the one who signed all the bills. And the victim: once again, me, the one who sacrificed so much that I erased myself from the family story. I flipped through each page, the ink still fresh. Each number was like a mocking laugh. $2,800 monthly transfer for Daniel's apartment. $1,299 for the MacBook. $18,000 for the wedding ring. $4,500 for the vacation in Greece. Altogether, when added up, the number jumped over $220,000. I leaned back in my chair and let out a dry laugh. If I had invested that amount in Apple stock 5 years ago, I could be retiring in Hawaii now, sipping mojitos on the beach, instead of sitting here watching my son ignore me on Thanksgiving. I poured another sip of whiskey, letting the sharp sting slide down my throat. My hand rested on the computer mouse, the cursor blinking right on the Manage Cards box. I scrolled down to Daniel Collins, authorized user. The screen lit up in blue, with the white letters standing out. Freeze card. I took a deep breath. In that moment, I heard my heart beating, slow and heavy. Then, I clicked the mouse. Click. The small sound echoed, but to me, it felt like the sound of a door that had been creaking for a long time, finally being slammed shut. I closed my eyes and leaned back in the chair, feeling an unexpected sense of relief. Light, as though I had just taken off the iron ring that had bound me for years. That credit card was no longer the bridge between father and son. It was now just a useless piece of plastic lying in Daniel's wallet. I sat still, watching the desk lamp flicker. The small room suddenly felt larger, quiet like a monastery. I wondered what Daniel was doing at that moment. Maybe he was sitting with Sophie at a bar, waving the card around saying, "My dad takes care of everything." Or maybe he was stopping at a gas station, about to fill up the tank for dinner. I chuckled, the smile crooked. "Go ahead, son." 15 minutes later, the card was declined. I just filled up the tank and it wouldn't swipe. The machine said error 3 times. "People are looking." "Dad, what did you do to the card?" I answered slowly, my voice calm to the point that I surprised myself. "You said you didn't need me, right?" There was a brief silence on the other end, only the sound of cars and someone shouting loudly, "Hey, can you pay or not?" Daniel stammered, "Dad, that's not what I meant. Just the card. Please turn it back on. I'll explain later." I smiled, took another sip of whiskey, then said briefly, "No Thanksgiving with me today. And tomorrow, no more of my money. Good luck." And I hung up. The phone rang again. Daniel called, Sophie called, and then a strange number appeared, probably one of his friends or a gas station employee. I silenced the ringer and let the phone vibrate on the table like a stranded fish. I stood up and opened the window. The November night air blew in, carrying the scent of dry leaves and smoke from the neighbor's fireplace. I breathed deeply, feeling a space inside my chest opening up. That space wasn't painful. It was refreshing, easy to breathe. I turned back to look at the stack of statements on the table. White paper, black ink. But to me, it looked like a relic of a marriage that had fallen apart. A father-son relationship that had been twisted. I gathered them up, placed them in a folder, and labeled it evidence. One day, I would need it. Not to sue, but to remind myself. Blind love can turn into monthly bills. As I was organizing the papers, my phone lit up with a new message from Daniel. "Dad, I'm stuck here. I don't have cash. Please help me this one time." I read it, smiled lightly. This one time, the same old line. I deleted the message, not even bothering to reply. That night, I slept unusually well. I didn't dream of Maria, didn't dream of Daniel. I only saw an open sky, no chains around my neck. I knew this was just the first blow. The real battle was just beginning, and this time, I was no longer the victim. I didn't take long to figure out what Sophie would do after the credit card freeze. She had always lived off appearances, and nothing works faster than social media and the well-placed words of relatives. Just as I expected, within a day, the story spread like a Black Friday discount. Sophie started with her family's group chat. The first message was sent with a serious tone. "Can you imagine? My father-in-law suddenly stopped all support, leaving us to fend for ourselves during a difficult time. It's so heartbreaking." I wasn't in that group, but thanks to an old friend of Maria who still kept in touch with that side of the family, I received a screenshot. I read every word. Heartbreaking? I almost choked on my coffee. I'm the one who's heartbroken after paying $18,000 for that wedding ring Sophie's still flaunting on her finger. Even worse, just a few hours later, one of Sophie's relatives, her cousin Madison, who made her living by selling things online but called herself an influencer, posted publicly, "It's sad when wealthy fathers are so stingy, abandoning their children when they need them most. Family isn't about calculating money. #family first." The post got hundreds of likes from Madison's friends, along with hollow comments. Exactly. Some old people just don't know how to love. I sat in the dark living room, reading each line, and just laughed. It's the 21st century. Anyone with a Facebook account can call themselves a judge, passing judgment with angry emojis. I sneered, muttering to myself, "Well, they play on social media. I play with bank statements." I didn't rush to respond. It's basic financial wisdom. Don't let emotions drive you. Let the data lead the way. In this game, I have the data, and data never lies. That night, I went into my office, opened the filing cabinet. The second drawer from the top was full of things I had intended to throw away. The car purchase contract in my name, the bank loan for the apartment, the furniture bills, and even the health insurance contract I paid for when Daniel was unemployed. I pulled everything out, stacking it into piles. Each piece of paper was a brick that built the lavish mansion Sophie was now bragging about. I carefully arranged them by year, clipped them together, and labeled them. 2018, wedding ring, Paris trip. 2019, downtown apartment, Italian sofa. 2020, Greek vacation, granite kitchen cabinets. 2021, Rome trip, dental work for Sophie. 2022, New York trip, 65-inch curved TV. I laid it all out on the table, staring at the final total. Over $220,000 in 5 years. A sum large enough for me to buy a small house by the beach or put it in savings for a comfortable retirement. But instead, I turned it into the hashtag our success on Sophie's Facebook. I took a few pictures with my phone, not to post right away, but to keep a record. I knew there would come whole stage crashing down. While I was busy gathering the documents, my phone buzzed constantly. Messages from Daniel. Dad, Sophie is really upset. Please say something to her. Then another. Dad, there are a lot of people bad-mouthing you on social media. Please don't make things worse. I read them but didn't bother to reply. Worse? My son still doesn't understand that the worst never started with me, but with the habit of treating me like a wallet. As the night fell, I sat amidst the mess of papers but felt strangely at peace. I had a weapon. All that was left was to wait for the right moment to use it. I thought about Sophie and the relatives gloating on Facebook, and I smiled. Go ahead, keep bragging, keep building statues. I'll be the wind that knocks that plaster statue down. A friend called, asking, Rich, what are you going to do? Let them slander you like that? I replied calmly, I've lived 62 years. A Facebook status won't make me poor, but a stack of bank statements can make me lose everything. I just need to be patient. I remember when I worked in the industry, I used to tell my younger colleagues, never fire all your ammo in one shot. Let them think you've given up, then hit them with the final blow. This time is no different. I'll stay quiet. Let Sophie think she's won with her social media. Let Madison keep hashtagging family first. Then one day, they'll understand what real data looks like. Before going to bed, I gathered the papers into an old leather briefcase. This briefcase had been with me through 30 years of my career, into countless meetings, signing countless contracts. Today, it would serve a new purpose: to hold the Pandora's box containing the entire truth about Daniel and Sophie's successful family. I locked the briefcase, set it on the table, looking at it like a gun that had been loaded. I whispered, just waiting for the right moment. And for me, that right moment is never on Facebook. The right moment is when the audience is present, the lights are bright, and the flip of the script sounds like thunder at a festival. I thought I would spend Thanksgiving dinner alone this year, maybe with some frozen turkey from the discount supermarket, reheated in the microwave, and then watch those tear-jerking family movies on TV. But then the phone rang, saving me from that pitiful fate. It was Paul Henderson, an old college friend of mine, now a retired doctor living in Scottsdale. Rich, he said in his booming voice, you can't sit home alone today. Come over. My place is always ready, and Susan cooked extra turkey like she does every year. I was going to decline, but then I thought, at least in that house, no one would be calculating how much I contributed to get a seat at the table. I agreed. And so, in the afternoon, I drove my old Ford, carrying my leather briefcase, the one I'd started seeing as the hidden knife in my coat. That knife hadn't been drawn yet, but I knew the day would come when it would gleam. Paul's house was glowing with yellow lights, the smell of roasted turkey mixing with cinnamon and nutmeg wafting from the windows. I knocked, and Susan, Paul's wife, opened the door, giving me a warm hug that almost left me breathless. Rich, you've lost weight, she exclaimed. I laughed and replied, Really? Must be thanks to my gourmet diet of instant noodles and premium peanut butter sandwiches. She widened her eyes and then burst out laughing. Come on in. The kids are looking forward to seeing you. In the living room, I saw 3 generations of the Henderson family gathered. Paul, Susan, their 2 daughters, and 4 little grandchildren running around. One little girl with blonde hair grabbed my hand and asked, Uncle Rich, do you want to see me draw a turkey? I nodded and looked at her messy crayon drawing. The turkey had 5 legs, but her smile was perfect. I praised, better than Picasso. She giggled and ran off to show her grandmother. We sat down at the table. The golden turkey was placed in the center, surrounded by mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and the fragrant pumpkin pie. I looked at the scene and couldn't help but compare it to the dinner at Daniel and Sophie's, where every dish was a competition to see who bought the most expensive ingredients. Here, no one needed a credit card to prove their affection. They just needed each other. When Paul stood up to carve the turkey, I couldn't resist making a jab. At least this turkey didn't swipe my card to get out of the oven. The table went silent for a few seconds. Then Paul laughed out loud. Yes, here we feed with the oven and love, not with bank interest rates. Everyone laughed and I joined in, a rare laugh, one that felt comfortable and free of bitterness. During the meal, I didn't have to prove anything. No one asked me how much I earned, what I contributed. Susan just kept scooping more mashed potatoes onto my plate, teasing, You need to eat more. You look like you're lacking in nutrients. The kids told stories about school. Paul bragged about his new vegetable garden. Simple, but warm. I sat there, and for the first time in many years, I felt like I truly belonged at a dinner table. Occasionally, my eyes would glance at the leather briefcase next to my chair. It sat there discreetly, like a knife still sheathed. Inside was a treasure trove of evidence, bank statements, contracts, and bills. I knew, when the time came, they would become the weapon to puncture the success bubble Sophie and Daniel were inflating. That thought made me feel both anxious and relieved. After dinner, we sat around the fireplace drinking coffee. Susan handed me a slice of pumpkin pie and said, Eat more. This is the kind Maria used to like. I froze. Maria, my wife, had sat here once many years ago, before we knew sickness, before debt. I took a bite of the pie, the sweet, rich flavor spreading, and I suddenly felt my eyes well up. Paul patted my shoulder. Rich, you always have a place here, remember that. Family isn't just about blood. Family is the ones who invite you to eat turkey without asking for receipts. I nodded, holding back a sigh. Inside I thought, yes, this is what family is. Not like the house I built with money, but I was made to feel like an outsider in it. That night, as I drove back, the Scottsdale Road was lined with yellow streetlights. I left the radio on, playing classical music, and my hand rested on the leather briefcase on the passenger seat. The streetlight's glow reflected off of it, making it look like a sleeping beast waiting to wake up. I smiled to myself. Don't worry, I whispered, as if talking to the briefcase. The time will come for you to make an appearance. But not today. Today, all we need to know is there's a table where turkey isn't charged interest. I got home, opened the door, and the room was dark and cold, but I didn't feel lonely anymore. I turned on the light, placed the briefcase on the table, and poured myself a glass of whiskey. I raised my glass, looking around the empty house, and quietly said, Merry Thanksgiving to me. And in that moment, I knew my silent battle was heading in the right direction. There are moments people remember for a lifetime, not because they're loud, but because they're so quiet that all eyes are on one person. That night, I, Richard Collins, the old man who had been turned into a walking wallet, was the center of that silence. Daniel and Sophie's house was glowing as if they had hired a Hollywood director to set the scene. Cars lined the street, and guests dressed up in fancy clothes. Through the large windows, I saw a long dining table piled with Western dishes, glasses of red wine sparkling. The air was full of laughter, glasses clinking. It was all like a stage, with Sophie as the leading lady and Daniel as the reluctant leading man. I stepped onto the porch, briefcase in hand. The door wasn't locked. Of course, why would it be? In Sophie's mind, the whole neighborhood was her private stage, and who dared enter without an invitation? I turned the knob, pushed the door open, and warmth, perfume, and the smell of roasted chicken rushed out. The room went silent when I appeared, as if an unscripted character suddenly stepped onto the stage. "Good evening," I said calmly, as though I was just making a social visit. I took off my coat, hung it neatly, and then placed the briefcase on the side table next to the fireplace. Sophie stood up abruptly, still holding her wine glass, her face hardening. What are you doing here?" I smiled. "I heard today is family gathering day. I thought I'd contribute a little flavor. Here's today's appetizer. Bank statements." I opened the briefcase, pulled out neatly sorted files, organized by year. I wasn't in a rush, so I leisurely handed them out to each guest. The closest person, one of Sophie's aunts, known for bragging about her spa, took one, curiously flipping it open. The others, seeing this, also leaned in to read. Whispers spread around the table. The pages exposed every penny I had paid. The luxury apartment in Daniel's name, the Italian sofa, the curved TV, the trip to Rome, the $18,000 engagement ring, even the tuition for Daniel's MBA, which he had boasted was a scholarship. Everything, without leaving a single charge out. The air seemed to have been sucked out of the room. Glasses of wine paused in midair, cutlery ceased clinking. I stood there, saying nothing more, just watching as everyone slowly realized that our success Sophie had been flaunting for so long was actually just Richard's payments. An older man, probably Sophie's uncle, looked up, stammering. Did you pay for all of this?" I shrugged, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Maybe I should start tagging my name under every Facebook post of theirs, right beneath our success. At least then, the audience will know who the real producer is. Daniel sat frozen, his face turning red, beads of sweat forming on his temples. Sophie screamed, her voice shrill. "He did it voluntarily. He enjoys paying. We didn't force him." I turned to her, my voice low and firm. Voluntary doesn't mean being exploited. And today, I'm voluntarily stopping. My words hit the table like a blade cutting through the act. No one laughed. No one dared interrupt. The table sank into a heavy silence, only the sound of Sophie's heavy breathing breaking the quiet. A female guest, a family friend, gently put the file down, shaking her head. "I never thought, Daniel, I really thought you were truly talented." Daniel lowered his head, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. I saw my son shrink, like a boy caught cheating in class. For a moment, I felt pity for him. But then I remembered the words, "I don't need Thanksgiving." That pity turned into a sharp clarity. Sophie still tried to fight back. She flailed her arms, spilling wine on the tablecloth. "Don't listen to him. These are just regular expenses. He's acting like the victim, but really—" I cut her off, my voice gentle but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Actually, I'm the one who spent over $220,000 on this family over the last 5 years. Actually, I lived on peanut butter sandwiches while you two sipped French wine. Actually, I'm the pillar you painted over and bragged to the world about building a house from scratch. That's the simple truth." The air tensed like a drawn bowstring. A child in the room whispered to her mother, "Mom, what's going on?" The mother blushed and pulled her child away. Sophie looked around, hoping to find some sympathy, but all eyes were filled with shock, even disdain. The successful family facade cracked right before their eyes, and I, a 62-year-old man, needed just a few files to make that happen. I closed the briefcase, stood up straight, and said nonchalantly, "That's enough for tonight. I won't stay for dessert. This pumpkin pie, I'm afraid. I already paid for the ingredients, so you two can enjoy it yourselves." I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, murmurs broke out. "I didn't expect this. How embarrassing. All these years full of lies." Every whisper felt like another nail in the coffin of Sophie and Daniel's reputation. At the door, I stopped for a moment, turned my head, and threw out one last line. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak the truth. Sometimes, Bank statements are more satisfying than turkey. Then I stepped out, closing the door behind me. The Arizona night was chilly, but I felt like I had just won a battle. In my hand, the briefcase felt lighter, as if the burden of years had been lifted from my shoulders. And in that brightly lit house, I knew the lavish party had turned into a silent trial. Daniel lowered his head. Sophie lost her credibility, and the audience, their family and friends, had seen the truth. And I, Richard Collins, walked away, needing no applause, no flowers, just the silence behind me, a silence that spoke louder than anything else. People say a bomb explodes in a second, but its aftershock lasts for months. For Daniel and Sophie, the aftershock of that revealing party began just 3 weeks later, when the off-white envelope from the bank appeared in their mailbox. I imagined Sophie tearing open the envelope, her red-painted nails trembling, then her face turning pale as she read the bold letters: Notice of default, final demand for payment, past due mortgage, 3 months overdue. Of course, I had stopped sending money, but they were used to living as if money grew on trees in the backyard. They thought everything was automatically paid as long as they swiped the card and smiled brightly for the camera. But real life has no Instagram filters. Real life has banks, interest rates, and deadlines never soften. I heard the news that Sophie moved back to her mother's house through a mutual friend. Her family, the ones who had sat proudly at the party, praising the success of the young couple, now saw Daniel as damaged goods. He can't even keep the apartment, they whispered. Everything turns out to be just the money from his old man. I smiled lightly when I heard this. Well, at least now they finally called it what it was. Daniel went from successful entrepreneur to failure in just one holiday season. One day he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, snapping a CEO vibes photo. The next day, he sat in the dark apartment staring at a pile of overdue bills, while Sophie screamed, "You've made me look bad," and finally grabbed her suitcase and left. If life were a movie, this would be the tragic background music. But in real life, it was just the sound of a suitcase being dragged down the steps. That evening, I heard a knock at my door. It wasn't strong, decisive. It was trembling, as if the hand knocking hesitated. I opened the door and there was Daniel. His eyes were dark, his hair messy, his suit wrinkled as if it had just been pulled from a pile of old clothes. He no longer looked like the arrogant son who had said, "I don't need Thanksgiving." In front of me was just a man stripped of his glory. "Dad." His voice was hoarse. "I need to talk." I didn't say anything, just opened the door wider. Daniel stepped inside, like a lost child returning to an old home. I went straight to the kitchen, took out 2 crystal glasses, and poured the best whiskey I had saved. I handed him one, then sat down in my armchair silently. Daniel held the glass but didn't drink. He swirled the amber liquid, his eyes on the floor. I knew in this moment, silence was more painful than 1,000 scolding words. And I wasn't going to rescue him by speaking first. He had to taste the bitterness of the truth himself. "Dad," he finally spoke hesitantly. "I know I was wrong. I didn't expect things to turn out this way." I just took a sip of whiskey. "Won't even look at me anymore. My friends, they're avoiding me. I've lost everything." His voice cracked, like someone drinking salt water. I placed my glass on the wooden table, the sound of it clicking clear. Daniel looked up, his eyes red, waiting, but I remained silent. "Dad," he stammered, "I remember when I was little, and I broke the window. You always paid for it and told me to be more careful next time. Back then, I thought you were a superhero. Now, I realize you were a superhero, but I turned you into an ATM. I know. I made you suffer." I took a deep breath, poured more whiskey into my glass. "Drink," I said, my voice calm. Daniel took a sip, grimacing at the sharp taste. I looked at him thinking, that's right, it's bitter, hard to swallow, but at least this is the bitterness he needs to experience. We sat in silence for a long while. Only the ticking of the clock sounded evenly, like the rhythm of Daniel's life of failure. I let him sit in the bitterness, because there's no lesson deeper than when one must swallow their own consequences. Finally, I spoke briefly. You've tasted what it's like not having anyone to take care of it. Uncomfortable, right? Daniel nodded vigorously, tears streaming down his face. I don't know what to say, but I'm sorry. I leaned back in the chair, exhaled slowly. Keep that feeling, Daniel. It's a bitter medicine, but it's necessary. If you want to start over, remember, love can't be measured in receipts, and I'm not a walking wallet. He buried his head in his hands, crying silently. I didn't comfort him, didn't pat his back. It was time for Daniel to grow up, not by my money, but by his own scars. I poured myself another sip of whiskey, raised my glass, and looked over. You said you needed to talk. So, is the talk over? Daniel looked up, eyes swollen. Dad, give me a chance to fix things. Don't leave me. I nodded gently but didn't make any promises. A chance isn't something I give. It's something you create. I'm just sitting here, with my whiskey, watching what you do with it. And that's how the conversation ended. No emotional hugs, no soft background music. Only the truth. Daniel had hit rock bottom, and if he wanted to climb up, he had to use his own hands. As for me, I sat quietly, took another sip of whiskey, feeling the burn in my throat. But this time, I tasted sweetness in the aftertaste. We sat there for a long time, only the yellow glow of the desk lamp illuminating the two whiskey glasses. Daniel wiped his tears, his face tired, but with something different. For the first time in many years, he no longer hid his weakness behind his suit or boasts. He was just a man sitting in front of his father, stripped of his failures. I placed my glass down, leaned back in the chair, speaking slowly, clearly, every word deliberate. Daniel, I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean going back to how things were. I will never pay off your debts again. If you want to start over, learn to stand on your own. Pay the price with your own sweat and effort. Daniel looked at me, his eyes red, tears welling up. He nodded repeatedly, as if afraid the opportunity would disappear if he stopped. Yes, Dad. I understand. I won't disappoint you again. His voice trembled, but this time there was no deceit. This was the first time I heard Daniel speak to me with his true voice, the voice of the son who once hugged me during a stormy night and said, I'm scared, but I have you here. I didn't respond with a hug, just a nod. Forgiveness isn't about wiping the slate clean. It's about resetting the rules. And the new rules were set right there at my small dining table. Dad is no longer a bank. The next day, as Daniel left, I stepped out onto the porch. The sky was a fiery red, the sunset casting long shadows across the yard, turning the pile of ashes in the metal stove a golden hue. I had burned all the files, the bank statements, invoices, and debt papers. With each piece of paper that burned, I felt like a chain was being lifted. The ashes scattered in the wind, vanishing into the air, just like the years of being used up now finally coming to an end. I sat down on the old wooden chair, listening to the crickets chirp beneath the grass. In my hand, I only had a whiskey glass, gleaming in the sunset's light. I didn't feel regret or anger anymore, only the peace of knowing I had stopped at the right moment. And then, as a habit, I turned to talk to you, those of you listening to this story, because I know somewhere out there are thousands of fathers and mothers like me, who once turned themselves into walking ATMs because they thought that was love. What do you think? I ask, my voice low but calm. Should a father keep paying for an ungrateful child? Or is it time to stop and let them learn to stand on their own? I pause, sip my whiskey, letting the question hang in the air, like an invitation for you to reflect. If you've been through this, share with me what you think. I want to hear stories from everywhere, from Ohio to Texas, from California to Florida. I want to see the map of America light up with the experiences of parents who were turned into wallets. I take a deep breath, my eyes gazing far toward the horizon. Then I add, Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. Here we will witness the betrayer's downfall, and those who were cast aside will reclaim their worth. That's justice, without shouting, without violence. Just the truth. I raise my glass, lifting it toward the sunset. Merry Thanksgiving to me, I whisper once more. But this time, I know, it's also a wish for all those who've ever been wronged in their own homes, that we can still find our value, even when our loved ones forget it.